So, Ray, Mizuto Hirota in Tokyo over the weekend, 28 pro fights, long-time lightweight contender type in Japan, and then dropped down to featherweight in 2013. He's drunk driving, walking up to the scale. I don't know if you saw the video. Weighed in 150 pounds, and ultimately the UFC's medical team deemed him unfit to fight. But it's just sort of the latest example in a long line of these situations where, people like me are just like, man, when is this going to end? When are cooler heads going to, when are smarter heads going to intervene and get in the way of this epidemic?
Yeah, no, look, there's, to me, as a, kind of, not an outsider, but there's nothing good about it. Nothing. I mean, I've witnessed some horrendous weight cuts where we've probably been lucky, and the guys have been lucky, but, I'd like to say that, making more weight classes would help, but I'm sure human nature would somehow find a way to screw that up. But I think that would be a big, big step in the right direction. And maybe going with that DEXA scanning, a month out or whatever, and, telling the guys they can't get lower than this weight, or telling them what their weight class will be, and that's it, maybe might help. So, weight cutting, it is a science, and, it's not easy. And if you don't have the right people around you, it's going to be even worse. So, I mean, it's like, again, you have to have really good people around you. And, just because you make the weight and you get up to that scale and you even look good doesn't mean it's good for you. That's the other thing, you're just making the weight, and that's always my problem as a coach, is watching a guy 10 days out looking phenomenal. And then you got Hell Week coming up where the guy goes through that weight cut. Yeah. And a whole host of things can happen in between that, the time you leave him and the time he fights. And that's it. I agree with you, man. I don't know what the solution is, but I would say making more weight classes maybe is a step in the right direction, and just really getting, kind of telling people what weight class they're in based on their body composition.
Yeah. And Kenny, I know we talk about this all the time, and you're a foremost authority on it, but I guess my thesis statement is sort of becoming, just because people like Chris Weidman, who reportedly once cut 32 pounds in 10 days, or people like Kenny Florian can mentally power through it, doesn't mean that it's right. And it's just, it's a very scary thing, Flo.
It is. When I look back, I was just, as Ray was talking, I was kind of flashing back to when I was cutting weight. And what's crazy is, at the time, for a fighter's mentality, like, I wasn't thinking that's not healthy. I wasn't thinking anything but there's no way I'm not making that weight. It just wasn't going to happen. And for me, that was the most important thing, and that was the only goal on my mind. I wasn't thinking about, oh, this isn't healthy, or, sure, I didn't feel great. I didn't feel great at all. But you become so determined as an athlete to not let yourself down, to not let the organization down, to make this weight, to get this fight, that you don't think about the other things, and that could be very dangerous to yourself. And I'm afraid that maybe we're getting to the point where we're going to see something bad happen, and then everyone's going to go, oh, yeah, you can die from something like that. And the big problem is, it's not only the weight class itself, right? In order for your brain to rehydrate, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to speak with tremendous authority on this, but it's pretty clear to see that if your brain isn't fully hydrated, and it takes more than 24 hours to do so, now you're going to go take shots to the dome after this, yeah. and that's where it becomes even more dangerous. So it's not only the weight cut, but then it's the fact that this guy needs to go out there and compete the next day. And I look at my fight at 145 pounds against Diego Nunes, and for me, I've been hit by a lot of big guys at 185 pounds, 170 pounds, and 155 pounds. And Diego Nunes at 145 pounds, I didn't think hit very hard, but when he hit me, all of a sudden I was on my knee out of nowhere. Same thing with Aldo. My body wasn't responding in the same way it normally does. And it's like, duh, you just cut an insane amount of weight, dude. That's what happened. So as someone who has done that stupid thing in my life a couple times, it is a concern. It is a danger. And I have a very different perspective now as someone looking from the outside in than I did when I was a fighter.
Yeah, and I'm going to let me touch on a couple of things Kenny said. I'm going to tell you, three things I want to get out. But the first thing is, what he says about making the weight. I begged Weidman in that Damian Maia fight not to do it anymore. He had 3 pounds to go. I said, just take the penalty. You already did. You already did unbelievable, and it's just not worth it. They'll understand because you took the fight last minute notice. And he really refused to. And what I saw during that weight cut, I wouldn't want anybody to see. Anybody remotely, responsible. Like from a doctor's standpoint, would have probably halted that fight. And again, when we got done with that fight, it was simultaneous. I think we hit the hotel room. We looked at each other and go, never, ever are we doing that again. You just can't, I got caught in something, and I really tried to get him to not do it, and he just wanted to keep powering through. And, he's got great mental fortitude, so, power to him. But not the smartest thing we do. And number two, man, I always tell that story. I was sitting next to Kenny with that Nunes fight, and he was out of it. He was totally out of it. I remember, that the accountant guy just, you got to sign the papers, and Kenny couldn't even answer him. I think Smuckler, whatever the guy's name is, to the point where I had to tell the guy, buddy, take a fucking hike.
That's right. I remember that. Ray jumped in. He's like, do you realize what this guy just did? Get the hell out of here. Wait till he wakes it. I remember. I just looked at Ray and just I thanked him with my eyes. I couldn't thank him with my words, but I just looked at Ray.
I'm going to tell you, John, I swear to God, Kenny never said a word. I told the guy, buddy, take a fucking hike. You can't do this to the guys. He can't even answer you. The guy's asking him for a signature on the paper. He couldn't even hold the pen. And he didn't thank me with his eyes. I felt his hand on my knee, just tapping my knee, saying thank you. That's how much energy he had. I remember it was Kenny, me, and Chris Weidman sitting there in, I think, Vancouver it was. And I'll never forget that. And I think I brought up that Kenny wasn't even sure it even happened.
Yeah.
That's how crazy it was. So, with that, it's just, look, there is no way it's good for you. There's just no way. Look, even now, I lost some weight. I'm working out really pretty freaking hard. Dude, I will not start a workout until I'm fully hydrated. That's the one
smart.
The one change I made. I'm not going to just rush into something. Now I have the time to do it. That hydration has to be there. I mean, and if it's not for me, I'm getting hurt. There's no question in my mind. So like Kenny says, I mean, if you're not hydrated, or it takes 48 hours to rehire, whatever the numbers are. And again, it is a science at this point that has to be even studied further. And then you're taking shots to the head. It's a different animal.
Yeah.
So, like, again, as a coach, the guy I see at 203 rarely is the guy I see at 185. And that's frustrating because the time you put in. And it could be just a little decrease in reaction time. It could be that, one thing went wrong. And it's a really slippery slope. And I'll tell you, I just want to give a shout. We have literally 2 experts in-house, Tony Ricci, who's phenomenal, and Dr. Sherry Wilkin, who really help in educating these guys. And I'm not saying they listen, but these are 2 people that, they walk the walk and they talk the talk, or talk the talk and walk the walk, both in tremendous shape, both, older people that have immense knowledge that really just try to get people to do the right thing. And, I just had this argument the other day. Is it, just building better habits where they're closer to the weight, or changing the weight, or, you can't trust these guys too much either. They're not, you leave them alone for 10 hours. They could slip up and eat the wrong thing. Then they got to make up for it a different way. It's a wacky process, man. But, you have to surround yourself with good people just to maybe make it okay. You know what I mean? And we're not sure of that. Again, I don't think there's anything good with cutting 12 pounds in a day, water weight, however. I'm going to even say this, Kenny. If I'm not mistaken, you helped Drago or Matt make weight. I mean, it was almost like a secret back then. You gave them that water loading thing. I think at the time it was you. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
I think you gave somebody, and it was like a jewel back then, because we didn't have the people. We didn't have the experts around back then.
Yep.
So, it was a lot of experimentation, and even for the amateur fighters who don't have sponsors or can't come up with money, and then they start asking just a random guy in the gym what to do. What are those poor guys doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, again, you have to surround yourself with good people. And I remember at the time Kenny helped us out, that was like, that was like a revelation. Like, wow, this is unbelievable. So I don't know, man. They have to look at it. I think there's got to be like like a summit on that and just come up with it. I think I like what Andy Forster did with the Aljo fight. He wouldn't let that kid,
Right.
what's his name?
Barrow,
Barrow go past 140. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just think you just keep working at it.
I can't get this visual of Ken Flo like a 95-year-old man reaching over to touch Ray Longo's leg to thank him.
That was it, though. You got the visual because it was like a 95-year-old man just patting my leg. I didn't even want to make him talk. I didn't
Thanks, kid. They appreciate it. Yeah, exactly. No, that's how it was. It's such a dangerous thing, and again. To talk about the whole thing with water, when you don't have a lot of water in your body, your blood isn't moving as fast. So your blood is starting to circulate through your body like a sludge, like there's a clog in the drain. And that's what causes the heart attack. So, I'd hate for something to happen in our sport, no matter if it's in the UFC or elsewhere, for us to learn a very difficult lesson here. I remember, was it like maybe 10 years ago, there were a few wrestlers within like a couple months time span where high school kids that are dying to make weight, and it's a terrible thing. And hopefully I think it's a lot better than it used to be. I definitely, we have to acknowledge that it is much better. We have a lot more professionals around monitoring that stuff, making sure that if the fighter doesn't look right, they're not going to fight, period. Obviously, we have a lot of fight cancellations. And I got to tell you,
and you're bringing up another good point, like high school kids, they want to do what the coach says.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's a responsibility on the coach. It's like, it's like going into the military. You torture those guys at 17.
Yep.
The same guy at 28, he ain't doing that. He's already, he's been out in the world. He's made up his mind on certain things. But those young guys really want to please, man. And that's where you fall into another trap. If you got the wrong coach and he's pushing you too hard, or we just had an incident out on Long Island where they were carrying a log. They were doing like Navy SEAL training, and, the kid dropped dead. Because I guess they were out in the heat, and I don't really know what happened. But again, it was just pushing the kids too much, and for what? You know what I mean? For what? Now the kid's dead. So it's you really got to be careful. When you get older, everybody has their own decisions to make on what they do, what they want to do. But as a younger guy, when you're listening to people, that's where I think it even becomes more dangerous, because you haven't been around long enough to build the mechanisms in your brain to say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, man. Something's, my